Hello, today we are doing the help machine from Hack the Box. It's a Linux machine and it's recommended in both the TJNull and LainKusanagi list to prepare for the OSCP. So let's get started. As always, we start with a port scan, and I'm using the auto recon tool with the recursive flag to enable recursive directory enumeration. Since port scanning takes some time, I already ran it before and we can have a look at the results. To do this, I start a Python HTTP server in my directory, and then we can browse the results in our web browser. We can see port 22 is open for SSH. We found port 3000. And we see we found one endpoint, GraphQL. We also found port 80. But we didn't find any endpoint here. So let's first visit the web server on port 80. And we see a redirect to help HTB. So let's add this to our hosts file. And we see a default Apache 2 website. Let's also visit the web server on port 3000. And we see a message query missing. In case you haven't heard of GraphQL, it's an API. It's different than, for example, a REST API. And we can visit the website and check this part. So how does GraphQL work? First of all, you need a schema. It's similar to a database schema where you define all the different types and the queries. And based on this schema, you can then perform queries, which is requesting data from the API. And the GraphQL API returns then exactly the data back that you requested. We can also try this playground. And this playground comes with a documentation explorer. So we can click here and we see the different types available in the schema. And we see one root query. And if we click on this, we see the different queries that are available. So we could, for example, query for all films. And if we click on this, we see the different arguments we can specify. And we see the query returns a film's connection. And if we click on this, we see there's a list of films returned with the type film. And here we see the different attributes for each film. So we can write a query. And here we see for each film, we get the title back. So we can change our query now and also ask for the director. Send again. And now we also get the director attribute back. So we can go back to our GraphQL endpoint and we can interact with this API now. And we can use our favorite API client. And I'm using the Bruno client. We create a new request. We select GraphQL. We give it a name. We select post because that's the default for a GraphQL API. And we enter our URL. And we can now send a query to the API. But the problem is that we don't know the schema. So we don't know what kind of query we can send. And in GraphQL, you can perform introspection. These are special queries to get information about the schema. And we can visit this website, GraphQL Voyager. And here we can click on Change Schema, select Introspection, and we can copy one mighty introspection query. We just paste it in here. And this query is trying to fetch all information about the API. So we send it and we get some data back. So instead of trying to understand this, we select it, go back to the website, paste it, and click on display. And we have a graphical representation. And we see we have one query, which is user. And this user query returns a user object. And this user object has two attributes, username and password. So we can now try to perform a query for this user object. And we get some data back with a username and a password. Looking at this password, this is most likely not a clear text password, but a hash. And very common is MD5. So let's check if we find a correct version of this hash. We can use a website called CrackStation. And we see the clear text password is God help me please. So the question is now, where can we use these credentials? We didn't have any different queries for the GraphQL API, so most likely not there. But when we go back to this Apache default page, we saw there was a redirect to this URL. And we can now try to do subdomain enumeration, but we can also do directory enumeration again with this domain and see if we can find anything. We can start with directory enumeration first, and we can see we found an endpoint support. So let's check this. And we see there's a running instance of help desk. And we see an account login, and we can try the credentials here. And we are logged in, so the credentials work. We can explore the website now, like my profile, preferences, change password. We can see any tickets. We can submit a new ticket, the knowledge base, and news. And whenever we find a running service like help desk, it's a good idea to search for public exploits. And that's what we're gonna do now. So there's a XSS vulnerability, and we have a file upload vulnerability. This looks more interesting. So we see it's unauthenticated, and we can upload a PHP shell. So let's try this. We download the exploit. Okay, we can see it's a Python 2 script, and we need to provide two arguments, the URL and the name of the PHP file we want to upload. We can use one of the Kali default PHP shells. We need to update the IP address and the port. We can start our netcat listener. And we can try to run the exploit now. It looks like the exploit didn't work. What we can do is we can check the repository of this service. And we see there's an uploads folder with tickets. So it could be that the uploaded file is actually stored here. So let's try to use this as the base URL. Again, it did not work. So as you can see right now, it always helps to read the full description of the exploit. So I forgot about the second part. So first of all, we need to upload our shell. I was confused by this unauthenticated shell upload, but yes, we need to log in, upload our file, and then run the exploit. So let's try this. So we are still logged in. We click on submit a ticket, general, next, priority, we keep it on low. We enter some subject, some message. We see the error message that the file is not allowed, but surprisingly, it still works. So we ignore this and we can run our exploit. So keep in mind, it's always good to just try out, even though you encounter some error message. And we got a reverse shell back. And we found the first flag, the user flag. But before we continue, we stabilize our reverse shell. We hit Ctrl Z and we set the term environment variable. So we can continue now with enumeration on this machine to find a way to escalate our privileges. And we can run LinPiece for some automated enumeration. We can transfer the script. And I still have the HTTP server running. And I also have the LinPiece script in this directory. It looks like the script is stuck, but we can have a look at the results that we have. And we start at the top. So we can see that the Linux version is quite old. It's also marked in red. And it's always a good idea to check for public kernel exploits. And we check for exploit. And we found one. So let's download it and try it. We compiled the exploit and now let's transfer it. And we can see that one of the imports was not found here, but we have GCC available on the machine. So let's transfer the C file and compile it on our machine here. and we have a root shell. And we can see the root flag. I hope you enjoyed the video and see you next time.